panel, we are very glad that open opposition concedes that the debate is a contractual one, which means they buy the analysis to be gives you about the pluralistic nature of rights at contestation here. So since this debate is removed from normal context of whether a woman should have an abortion or not, since this debate is situated in a context where we recognize the pluralism of the actors present, we must therefore resolve this on a quantitative basis of what best maximizes the rights of the most entities. Toby has already done that, but let me engage the material and respond to like the best possible position material we can envisage. The entire case is that we must have compromise. So when this sort of situation occurs, you should go and talk to the woman. We are perfectly fine with the world where a man goes to approach the woman and say, I would rather have the child, you don't want to, let's reach a compromise. All of this we believe, as POI shows you, happens before such a drastic measure occurs. So for her to just assume that we have not had any sort of discussion with the woman and that is her counterprop in this debate is very, very shoddy. In the instance where that compromise leads to a positive result, one that is mutually beneficial to both parties, obviously this model is not invoked. We are very fine with that world. In the instance where there remains a conflict, where the woman says, no, I would rather still have an abortion, that is where this motion is applicable. Recognize how they have no engagement whatsoever to that world. What do you do when the woman says no? Do you carry out an abortion? Do you violate the rights and wishes of that man as well? They have absolutely no response. So open opposition has not engaged us in this debate. 4 things I'm going to be showing in this debate. But before then, one response to the material which we anticipate is going to be closing's argument. Closing asks us a POI. They say, having sex does not mean consenting to having a child. Of course, but we tell you that when you are talking about contracts, and they all agree on this side that this is a contractual relationship that we are evaluating what is the most valid course. When you are evaluating contract, the fact that you do not consent to a certain possibility does not mean when it results, you are not going to take responsibility. So if you buy shares in the company, for example, and as a result of buying those shares, some terrible thing is done by that company, and the federal government has to punish you by taking away some of your money. The fact that you do not consent that the CEO of that company should go and bomb a place or pollute Niger Delta or whatever does not mean when that occurs, that non-envisaged reality that occurs, your lack of consent means that contract is vitiated. That's absolutely rubbish. Your lack of consent does not mean it's vitiated. But on a second level, even if lack of consent means it's vitiated, that is not a defense in instances where you can anticipate the risk of a certain thing, anticipate the occurrence of a thing, and pregnancy is clearly something you can anticipate. It's not something miraculous that is out of the blue. So on those 2 levels, that's not an extension. We hope they do better. 4 things. We're going to be establishing one, how the moral legitimacy of abortions is very ambiguous, even though legal, and how this is the best course to navigate that moral ambiguity. Because even though legally it is fine, we tell you that moral ambiguity is very important in such an instance of like this contract which we are regarding, right? Secondly, we tell you that there is an illegitimacy of killing the person's child. So your autonomy does not extend beyond that of your personhood. And we tell you that a child is beyond your personhood, even though they are in your body, for example. Even though somebody's relative, for example, is tied inextricably to your body for 9 months, you do not have the ability to say, because I am autonomous as an entity, I can kill that person's relative. That is not an autonomy. That's not what the autonomy, for example, grants you, regardless of however you feel about such an imposition upon your personhood. On the 3rd level, we will tell you how ultimately the resolution of conflicts of interest in case of pluralistic rights is done. Let's engage this, and then before then.
All right. Yeah. Why is there a compulsion to the extent that it gratifies the desires of a party at the expense of others?
This is very simple. Compulsion occurs in contractual cases where there is an inability to resolve it due to indivisible goods. A fetus is not a divisible good. You cannot take the fetus and divide it into 2 and abort half of the fetus and then keep half of the fetus for the parent. That is nonsense. Also, you cannot take out that fetus and do a pregnancy transplant, which is technology that does not exist, to another woman's womb. That's also nonsense, and Toby tells you. Yes.
So David says in contracts, when you try to reach a compromise and you have to compel. So you have to buy something from you and you do not sell. You have to take it from you compulsory.
Of course. Sit down and receive the explanation. Here's the thing. Ultimately, when you are resolving conflicts of interest in cases of pluralistic rights, your ability to possess even 80 or 90 or 95% of your rights does not mean you have guarantee or totality of the outcomes, right? Even if you say a woman has the majority of rights in the control of her body or in this sort of discourse, she does not have the totality of outcome. What then do you do when there's an indivisible good, as I responded to their POI in such an instance? You do what is proposed by this motion, you provide compensation, you provide harms mitigation, and that's what's ultimately done. To the extent where this is what is done in the world of contract, where there's an indivisible good and both parties would like one outcome or the other, you compensate the party that you have imposed an unnecessary burden upon them. To the extent where a man can provide a compensation to the woman, but a woman cannot provide a compensation to the man in lieu of a child lost, How is the woman going to compensate the man if she aborts the child, right? We are totally fine with that kind of scenario. That scenario where the woman can abort the child and then provide some magical alternative child for that man. To the extent where the woman does not have a commensurate ability to compensate the man, and only the man in this instance has the ability to compensate the woman, and this is an indivisible good where you cannot abort half the pregnancy and keep half the pregnancy. We are the only side that wins this debate. This debate ultimately falls on one simple question. Can autonomy be usurped? The answer is clearly yes. They concede this when they tell you that yes, in contract, only one individual is not the focal point of consideration. They concede this with all the POIs they ask you about how do we best seek a compromise. So they legitimize our notion that compromise is what is sought. On their side of the house, the burden before them is to show how a compromise can occur where a woman can abort half and keep half, or where a woman can do something that can be mutually pleasing to the man and pleasing to herself. Only this side of the house provides that. Only we in opening government provide a mitigation of the harms and imposition of the woman, and at the same time provide benefit for the man. We have been very proud to outline this case. In the end, we must recognize that we live in a world where even though abortion is legal, killing a child's life is legal, it is based on a very precarious notion of moral status. We do not see children or fetus as potential human beings. We anticipate a world where this is likely to change. But even if this does not change, we think that if you live in a world where a contract is what is at issue here, you have a man who has contributed a thing, a man whose relative is in another woman's stomach, a man who is emotionally invested in that outcome, a man who has contributed maybe financially and whatever skill that desired end, a man who might be existentially threatened by the removal of that fetus. For example, a man, if he is religious, will be fearing to go to hell as a result of whatever consequence comes out of that action. Such a man is one that ultimately should be considered by society. And basic liberal arguments on this side about autonomy of a woman and other nonsense are irrelevant in this context. We are looking at advanced progressive liberalism. We must consider what is the best balance of rights. The best balance of rights follows on our side. That best balance of life is keeping the child safe, is keeping the man's interest at heart, but it's also making sure that the woman does not suffer. And we provide that in our model, and they have failed to contradict it. We have been very proud to propose.